When I look at you compared to how old I am, I see in this room the future of this county, of this state, and of this nation. You are the future. I have to get into the heads of young people such as you with respect to a scourge in our society. Heroin. When I was much younger, when I was an assistant prosecutor in the Butler County Prosecutor's Office and chief of the criminal division many years ago in the 70s and early 80s, heroin was something that was never really heard of in this county. It had a truly evil connotation. Heroin. But as the Attorney General has said in Ohio in the symposiums that he has put on, and as I have and other prosecutors have, the word heroin has lost that connotation of evil and has just become another one of the drugs available and becoming more available in our society every day, with disastrous consequences, with horrible results. Heroin is an exceptionally dangerous drug. It is a drug that you cannot experiment with. Regrettably, our experience in our society shows that there has been experimentation with drugs. You've heard about it. You've heard about it from our own presidents, Republicans and or Democrats. One said, I smoked it, but I didn't inhale. Another said, I tried it all. But the bottom line is they were experimenting with things that did not involve heroin. One and done. One and done is what happens with heroin. When you inject heroin into your body, it will either kill you or cripple you for the rest of your life. What separates humankind from other creatures in the animal kingdom is our ability to think abstractly. You are able to conceptualize dangers without experiencing the danger. You are able to learn without actually experiencing something to learn. That's why we've been able to go from the jungle to the shopping malls. Now, with respect to this issue, I want you to be able to tell your fellow students that they need to mentally experience from the experience of others the tragedies that befall young people and old people alike when they become involved with heroin. The drug dealers have only one objective. Only one. Money. They're not selling heroin because they want you to feel good. They're not selling you heroin because they want you to get over your drug sickness from not having your heroin. They're selling you heroin because they want to keep you addicted and they want to make money. And of course, that's all criminal activity. The use of heroin by a young person or an old person is a crime, of course. But when you make a bad choice to use heroin, you become a victim. And I believe that we have to treat those afflicted as victims of crime in spite of their bad choices. But it doesn't mean that I cannot do my job as a prosecuting attorney, as I'm required to do, and that is to prosecute crimes as they occur. And it's a terrible position sometimes to be in, where I'm faced with some young person who has committed a crime involving the possession of heroin, who I must prosecute for a crime, and also treat that same individual as a victim. Our legislatures and our courts have designed programs, however, to mitigate that problem. We have what are called drug courts, so that the victims of these offenses, the victims, not the sellers, not the dealers, but the victims who are addicted, can go to a drug court, become treated, graduate, and perhaps re-enter society without so much as a criminal record. That is a compassionate society that does that, because we know that we cannot prosecute our way out of this problem. We cannot arrest our way out of this problem. Yes, we have to treat our way out of it, and there are people much smarter than I that are involved in that treatment process. Now, here's where you come in. Here's where you come in. I have decided that perhaps the best way for me as a prosecutor to stop the problem that I see every day in my office is to be proactive against heroin, not reactive. Well, what do you mean by that? What do you mean proactive versus retroactive or reactive? Criminals commit crimes. Police react by arresting the criminal. Prosecutors react by indicting the criminal. Courts and juries react by having a trial towards a conviction. Defense attorneys, court appointed, they react by representing that individual. Juries react by a verdict, judges do too, and then the wardens of prisons react by closing and slamming the door to the prison. That's a reactive system. And maybe that person then gets into a reactive counseling when they get into prison and perhaps drug treatment there. Everything is reactive. But we can be proactive by getting to the root of it before the needle gets in somebody's arm, if we only know how to do it. How do we get into their heads? I realized that you, the students, the leaders here in this room, and your classmates are ultimately going to be the solution to that. Because in my discussions with addicts that I've learned from talking to so many of them, I have learned that some of those heroin addicts made statements like this: "Gee, I didn't know heroin was so addictive. Nobody ever told me how dangerous it was. Nobody told me it would destroy my life, that I would be addicted for 20 or 30 or 40 years in one case." And I said to this person, half jokingly, I said, "What, were you living under a rock? Didn't you know how dangerous this was?" And the answer was, "No, nobody ever taught us anything about this. We thought it was just like all the other stuff, that you could try it, that it'd make you feel good. It would numb their senses of problems that they had in their personal lives. Perhaps they were abused as a child physically. Perhaps they were sexually abused as a child at home. Perhaps they had peer pressures that were working against them. Many different reasons for getting involved. But they just didn't know that heroin was so damning and so disastrous because nobody ever taught them. Nobody ever talked about it. Somehow or another, the message just never got out there. And it came to me one day from working with the prom initiative that you're familiar with. You know how your schools at prom time, you get together and each school has a program on how they're going to avoid drinking and driving on prom night. The students invent the program. The students bring the program to the adults and say, this is what we want to do in our school to avoid this problem on that one night. Well, the heroin initiative has to be more than just one night. It's got to be 365 days a year. You've got to learn it. You've got to live it. You've got to be able to say no to it, and you've got to mean it. Because heroin will take your life, and then it will kill you. So the message has got to get out from the students. And how is that going to be achieved? Edgewood High School has invited me to give a presentation next week. And I'm going to talk to 1,200 students at that time and tell them about how I formulate the initiative. It's called the Guardianship Initiative. The Guardianship Initiative is this. Each senior will be paired with a junior. Each junior will be paired with a sophomore. Each sophomore will be paired with a freshman. They will meet 4 times a year. They will have talking points that my office will prepare and submit for review. And it won't be a long discussion on their mentoring meetings, but they'll meet 4 times a year just to make sure that they're all on board with a knowledge and an awareness that you cannot play with, experiment with, or get pushed into, or find solace in the use of heroin, because it will kill you. Then, each year, each senior graduating class that has mentored, each participant will receive a certificate of completion, signed by me and the superintendent of the school. And why is this important to you? Because you will be able to pad your record for college admission. You've been a part of a anti-drug program, number 1. And if you're not going on to college, you'll be able to use that certificate to go to an employer and say, you should hire me because with all the drug problems we have, I was a part of a program to stop the problem. That'll be a plus for you. And I'm going to be able to track this. I'm going to be able to find out whether this is successful or not. Because frankly, I don't know. What I do know is I'm tired of hearing about meetings and symposiums on the drug problem, because it's not accomplishing anything. We just have more meetings and more symposiums. We've got to do something in an active way to get into the minds and hearts and souls of the children in a captive audience, which I will have. Where? In the schools. Every person generally that is charged with an adult crime came out of our public education system or parochial system of education somewhere along the line. Somewhere along the line, they didn't get the message, or nobody gave them the message. But I give them the message with an indictment, and the warden gives them a message when they slam the door behind them. 85% of every case I prosecute, 85% of every case I prosecute has some element of drug abuse. Not all heroin, no. Not all methamphetamine, which is another terrible drug, by the way, no. Not all mollies and amphetamines and all of the other pills that are available, no. Not all marijuana, no. But somewhere along the line, 85% have some elements of all of those drugs. That's why drug abuse in our culture is such a gigantic problem. You all know from your own experience watching television that we are perhaps the most medicated society in the world. We are used to taking pills to solve our problems. We're used to taking pills to make us feel better. And therein lies one of the problems when doctors give pills to somebody who's in great pain to make them feel better, as well they should. Sometimes those individuals become addicted to those substances, and the aftercare is absent. They become addicted and they go to the street to continue the addiction, which eventually does lead up the road to heroin use. Why do I know this? Because I've talked to the addicts that have had that problem generated in that specific way. So we have to get the message out this way, and I'm going to be able to track it and see how successful this program is going to be, because frankly, I don't know if it's going to be successful. All I really know is that I have a shot at doing something my own way, and I'll take responsibility for it if it fails. But if it does fail, at least I'm going to go to sleep at night and saying I tried to do something. I just didn't go to another meeting. I actually got off my butt and went out there and talked to people that could make a difference, where I had a captive audience with that audience that I might be seeing later on in my professional capacity. which I want to avoid if possible. And so how do I track it? Well, I have put a directive out to my staff, the trial lawyers in my office, the other assistant prosecutors that try cases every day, and when somebody appears before a judge and enters his plea of guilty or not guilty, they usually just give their age, but now they're going to have to give where they went to high school. I want to know where every drug abuser went to high school. Now, maybe they'll say they went to high school in Philadelphia. Maybe they'll say they went to high school in New York. But maybe they'll say they went to high school at Ross or Baden or Hamilton. Because one thing I have learned is that this drug problem is in every school, or comes out of every school in this county. Nobody is immune. And it's just not the impoverished and the poor people that have drug problems. It hits across a broad spectrum of everybody, from the most wealthy to the most poor. It doesn't discriminate, heroin doesn't. Regardless of who you are and where you are, if you use it, it's going to take you. So I'll be able to find out whether or not a school is doing better each year or worse each year. If the epidemic, if my program isn't having any effect on the epidemic, I'll learn that. And I'll know that maybe I have to do something better, or I have to get the students more engaged. But I want to hear from you today. I know I've talked a lot. Like I said, that silent G, right? Not so silent. I want to know from you what you think about this mentoring program. If you get students together 4 times a year, just for a brief period of time, to discuss the issues, the talking points that a prosecutor gives to you, is that something that would resonate with you? Because we know that just telling you and going to a program and saying, if you use heroin, I'll prosecute you and send you to jail, it might scare you that afternoon, but by 4 o'clock tomorrow, it's history. The fear is gone. We need to have something more than just fear instilled in your hearts to stop the problem. So what do you think about this? Anybody want to give me a comment? Now you get the drift of how this program will work. What do you think? How about you, miss? What do you think?
I really like the idea of getting into the schools and starting at like the roots of what's happening. I think the mentoring idea is a great start, but I think to get a lot more people to get on this mentoring thing is to have the whole school to come together in an assembly and present the information and what's happening so they're aware. And if they care to do something about it, they can mentor and participate in this, and so we'll have a bigger outcome.
I think that's an excellent idea. Sort of like aftercare from the presentation I give, which I will do in every high school that I'm asked to give a presentation at. And by the way, I was asked to do this at Edgewood this coming Friday, next Friday. And then Talawanda, the superintendent of schools there, has asked me, as a result of a presentation I gave last night, he asked me to come and make the presentation to his students at Talawanda High School. And hopefully along the way, other superintendents will feel likewise and see the merit of involving the students, the captive audience, in this program. But the idea of then getting them engaged beyond just the talking points, so that more can be learned from it. I think that is a great way to segue into even more awareness. Because if we're going to treat this like a real epidemic, then we have to do real things to make it work. Fair enough? Does that sound like a plan? Young man, what do you think?
I think it's a good idea, and I think that the more people that are involved in it is gonna, the more that you make them aware, the more they'll want to do something, and it'll result in a better outcome.
Do you think that if they realize that it is a sincere effort to protect a student, as opposed to just somebody saying, I want to prosecute you if you violate the law, do you think that'll resonate better with them if they know that somebody me, as well as the superintendents of the schools and the principals and the adult staff, if they know that we are really concerned about health, not just the criminality of it, do you think that'll make more of a difference?
Yeah, I think it'll help if they feel that somebody actually cares about it and about them and their future, that they'll be able to respond better to.
Who's going to tell me about what's going on in their schools right now? Does anybody feel that there is that awareness from the adults at this point? Yes, miss.
I feel that in like our own lives, the most we hear about drugs would be probably like weed. So I think to bring a program that brings awareness to heroin would be a really awesome idea, to make sure children are like instilled with these ideas and a knowledge of it before it becomes a problem later in their lives, and they know how dangerous it is.
Thank you. I think, and that brings me to a point that I want to make sure I make. Just because I'm talking about the evils, the true evils of heroin, does not diminish the fact that I don't approve of marijuana and illegal pills and other illegal drug substances and things of that nature. It's not a pass to say, okay, he's only concerned about heroin, so I guess cocaine's all right. No, that's not the case at all. But I feel if I can make the point with heroin, if we can start to recognize that word as something truly insidiously evil, that it will make a difference. And one of the approaches that I will have to this is to show the students how they are able to think abstractly by putting on a demonstration. I won't go into the demonstration now because I want to surprise them at Edgewood on how we are going to be doing it.
I was just wondering, what type of questions will you be asking or talking points will you be having with the kids or the schools?
The talking points will be directing them to what type of problems they have been having that might lead them into drug use. Is anybody suggesting to them that they might want to be involved with some type of drug use? Is this something that you feel that you can talk about drug use with your mentor or the mentee? I want to get a discussion going between the students and their willingness to respond to social pressures in a way that will prohibit them from getting into drugs as opposed to going into drugs. Okay?
When you were saying about the 4 meetings and everything, I know like if we meet a lot about something, it's going to get old. But when, like meet once at the beginning and end of a quarter, because I know during a quarter for me, a lot of things change. And I don't know if any like major life events had happened for that person. Just a little more frequent, not like 2, because then it's going to get old and just routine.
Sure.
Like once before and after a quarter, because a lot could change in that quarter as far as stresses at school and peer pressures throughout that quarter.
That's a good point. And that's why I want to do this 4 times a year, 4 times a school year. So it'll be staggered out. So there'll be a little different agenda from each series of talking points that are given for the meeting. Because I don't want people to just say, okay, so here we are now. What are we supposed to talk about? You know, the whole idea is education. And each student will probably have their own stories to tell. I can't tell you how many times I have heard from parents and from citizens about this social problem with drug and drug abuse in their families today. So people are learning, but I want them to learn in a more structured way, in a way that I can be assured by the captive audience that they're all getting the message. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about this important initiative.
Thank you for coming.